Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is Kristen Mullins with Special Olympics Maryland, your Regional Sports Director and Kayaking Staff Lead. Also on the line, available for questions about kayaking, we have Jack Brocious from the Upper Shore and also Mike Zarnowski, VP of Programming. I'm so glad you all were able to join us this evening. Tonight, we're going to cover some just administrative paperwork, certifications, some rule updates and reminders, qualifying for state championships, deadlines, and also if you have questions, you can type them in on the control panel on the right of your screen, or you can also use the raise your hand option where then we can unmute you and have you ask the question directly where everybody can hear what you're asking. So we're going to go ahead and get started. We have a sports management team that went over last year's event and also discussed the upcoming season. Those people consisted of Jack from Upper Shore, Al from Anne Arundel, Mike from Baltimore City, an athlete, Erica Wheeler from Carroll County, and Ben from Washington College. We did have 2 people change their status of availability, so we are looking for 2 people to add to the sports management team. So is that something that you're interested in? You feel you have coaching or kayaking experience that you'd like to help us out? Just contact me via email of your interest. We like to put this slide at the very beginning of the webinar to hopefully put this at the top of your to-do list to remind yourself and also your area directors that at the beginning of the season, no athlete or volunteer can participate in any manner in Special Olympics programming without valid medical forms or volunteers application. And really, there's no exception to this policy. If you would like to have a copy of your roster based off of last year, just to see where everybody's standing, once again, just email me. That's an easy report for me to pull at GMS. Same thing with your area leadership. That is something that they can get for you, just so you're starting off the season on the right foot. It's one of those things everybody wants to get in the water, put the PDFs on, and get paddling, but you can hold that over them, that kind of little cherry on the top, by telling them that they got to get their paperwork in, that it really is a policy for Special Olympics to protect us with our insurance and also to protect yourself as a coach. So please make sure everybody who is volunteering in any manner with athletes and athletes themselves have proper paperwork taken care of. Once again, this is going a little bit more in the depth. Make sure you're working with your area leadership. Everybody must have their forms in. That's also a good point to say that this webinar is occurring at the beginning, almost pre-season for kayaking. So you have a great opportunity to really check that out before maybe you start even your first practice. Some great deadlines for you to kind of be aware of. This is deadlines and dates that have been sent out bi-weekly in the area memo, but just as coaches, making sure that you have the direct information of when everything is due. So mid-July on the 12th is when all of your rosters of everyone who you might think will be participating with your program need to be entered into GMS. As of right now, the 2018 sports training combined is available. So your area leadership could be putting in your team members now, if they'd like, to know their availability and their status on their paperwork. Last day to send in documentation is on the 20th. And goodness gracious, right there, I missed a date. I apologize. I'll make sure I have that correction for their medicals. And then the last row at the bottom, competition deadline. Can you believe it, guys? August 2nd. August 2nd is when we'll need to have everybody entered into GMS for competition. Coaching requirements. Of course, we want to make sure all coaches have a Class A volunteer application, which is a background screening, their protective behavior screening, concussions training, and then head coaches a completion of coach-specific certification. All of them are valid for 3 years. So this is really where at the beginning of the season, it's a great way for you to check your coaching staff to see if anybody has something that's going to maybe be up in the middle of the season, or right after, go ahead and get it taken care of so then you're cleared for 3 years. The protective behavior certification is very easy to complete. It takes about 10 minutes online, and you will be able to submit that information to either myself or coaches@somd.org. Coaches concussion certificate, anyone who is of coaching status, not just head coaches, but anyone that is on your roster as a coach, must complete the concussion certification. Moving on to the specific kayaking events, here you will see we will have the 100-meter straight, 100-meter double, 200-meter straight, 200-meter double, the 500 straight, 500 double, and then the 1K individual and 1K doubles. Are there any questions? I'm not sure I can see anything. Everybody looks good so far. Okay. Qualifying for the state tournament, first thing is making sure everybody's met all training and registration requirements and deadlines, that athletes and partners have attended practices, that they have all of their paperwork turned in, and that all of your coaches have their certification requirements. It is a minimum for kayaking to attend 2 sanctioned qualifiers, and the key word there is sanction. That means, which I will attach in the email after this webinar when I send the slide deck out to you guys, there's a sanction form that must be filled out and submitted to me via your area leadership, so then we know that you are hosting a qualifier. One of them can be a multi-area qualifier, say that Frederick and Montgomery want to host one together and Anne Arundel shows up, that counts as a multi-area qualifier. If you have a single, like an in-house qualifier, that's fine, but then your other qualifier must be a multi-area, which is aka the time trials if that's the only other option you have, or visiting another area's qualifier. You want to try your best to work to have as many competitive opportunities as possible. Given the weather we've already had in 2018, and since this is a water outside sport, you want to maybe have as many available options as you can, if you can. I completely understand with the summer vacation season, but just want to make sure that you have all qualifier schedules just in case. Entries. All athletes must complete in the mandatory time trials. The time trials will be on August 12th at Washington College and at least one other. And this is explained a little bit further as to what an in-house qualifier talks about. And what an in-house qualifier means that you at your practice, if you decide to make it an in-house qualifier, that you actually set a course with markings, you have officials in place to set the times, and they're recorded and then submitted to me following the competition. Athletes and partners can enter up to 2 events and 1 doubles or unified event, but athletes cannot be in both the 100 and the 500 or the 1K individual events. So it's not 2 + 1, it's a double event. Rule reminders, just to let you know, there are new rules possibly coming out in July or August of this year. Just to let you know, we will not change any of the rules in mid-season, so we are going with the rules that were published in 2016 unless it is a health and safety ruling. Of course, as soon as we have access to those rules, we will let you know if there's something we need to modify for the health and safety of our athletes. But as for any such ruling as of length, size, competition, we made the decision to hold off on that, and that is a all sports rule from Special Olympics Maryland. From the 2016 kayaking rules, there were no substantive content that was changed, but just know that here's an access, a resource, and I will attach the coach's resource guide in my email to you tomorrow, just so you have an opportunity to review that prior to season. A quick word on uniforms. Competitors must wear shirts and shorts or pants during all practices and competitions. A PDF must be worn by athletes and partners while on the water or on a dock. Helmets are optional, and athletes may wear water shoes, polarized sunglasses, and even hats that they're recommended depending on the weather, but it's optional. Some more talk on some rule reminders. There will be an umpire safety boat on the water during practices and competition. The number of umpires or safety boats at your practice and at our competition will depend on the weather and the ability levels of the athletes and how many we have available. All athletes must remain in the kayak at all times, and legs must be in the kayak. Please pay attention, coaches, to horseplay on the water, because this is something that, you know, how they practice can indicate how they're going to compete. So please monitor your athletes' behavior on the water, so then once they get to competition, they are following the rules of competition for their safety and also to medal and score. And the last point, please make sure your athletes are seizure-free for 1 year prior to competing in your swim or for your kayaking season. Some quick information about equipment. All kayaks are required to have flotation devices. They should be marked with appropriate size. Each athlete must qualify and compete in a boat of similar size and make as best you possibly can. Each athlete must qualify and compete using the same style and paddle. There are no surfboard style kayaks allowed. And at SOMD events, teams must bring their own kayaks unless, I'm putting the stipulation in there, you've communicated with other programs and you've asked to borrow kayaks from them. But please know that for our time trials and championships, no athlete or program can have more than 2 athletes borrowing or switching boats. It gets too crazy trying to stage people and waiting on areas to have boats coming in from races. So only 2 athletes per boat. On the water safety, please make sure that athletes are lining up at the start line. We do have a hold start at our time trials and championships, but they should be able to be trained to maneuver their boat to a start line. Coaches are not allowed on the water unless previously designated as safety boat or a lineup helper. So please, coaches, be aware of that as you are even lining up and setting up your own qualifiers, that you're really trying to train them for time trials and championships, that the more that they are prepared and independently can get themselves to the start line and get through a race, the better, because you know that you will not have access to them once you are at Washington College. Then,
Kristen? Oh, yes. I'm sorry. Go ahead and finish. Okay. I thought you were done. Adam had a question. Can athletes use sit-on-top kayaks? Correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that's what they're talking about when they say surf-style kayaks. Jack, is that correct?
No. Surf-style kayaks are like stand-up paddle boards that people sit on and paddle.
Okay.
The sit-on-top kayaks are actually specifically kayaks, and they sit on top, but they're actually sitting in them. They just don't have a cockpit.
Okay. Adam, your line's open. I just want to make sure that we're talking about the same thing here. Okay. Adam?
Is Adam talking about something like ocean kayaks, or is he talking about a stand-up paddleboard type?
Hello? This is Adam. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
No, I didn't mean a stand-up paddleboard. Just I have some kayaks here that are I call them sit on tops, but they're what you're talking about. With they're not in a closed cockpit basically, so their legs are fully exposed, but they're still sitting on in the kayak. It's not a stand-up paddleboard.
Yeah, that's not a problem.
Okay.
Okay. If I can suggest, Adam, just to be safe, if you could take a picture, of it.
Okay.
And email it into Kristen, and just so, I mean, Jack's our expert, but just so we're sure we're talking about the same thing.
Definitely.
Who makes your boat?
I'm not sure off the top of my head. I could double check it and find out. But we have 3 or 4 of the same ones that are sit on tops.
You know, we have 12 at the college,
Oh, cool.
all made by Ocean Kayaks.
Okay, great. So if you send a picture and we'll just double check and confirm that that's the case, that we're talking about the same thing. Great, thank you.
Thank you, Adam, for that question. I really appreciate trying to clarify, especially as we're seeing pictures in the webinar, and there are so many different types of boats. So yes, if you have a question, if you're concerned about your style of kayak, please let me know, and of course we'll verify with the sports management team and Jack. Some rules for events: if you are going to host a qualifier during your season, please make sure that you follow the same race protocol that they will see at time trials and at championship, that all races are started by the following command: athlete ready, followed by a sound of an air horn. For hearing impaired individuals, you can drop a flag along with the air horn, and a white flag, and then a red flag raised at the end, or the finish line will indicate the infraction in a lane. So just so they get used to seeing what that means, or at least telling them if you see this on a race, that what the flags mean, that there was an infraction. You want to make sure that no coaching occurs from the shoreline, specifically paddling instructions. Of course, we want to encourage them as much as possible, but just be careful of your language and how you are coaching them during training, or excuse me, during qualifiers. If any of the athletes fall out of their kayak during a race, they'll be given an opportunity to re-enter their kayak and resume. Safety boats will, of course, assist athletes who do not wish to try to continue. And correct me, Jack, if a safety boat assists an athlete, that means the athlete has then been disqualified, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. So you want to, that's something very early on in the season. I know sometimes it can turn into a game, you know, flipping their kayaks because maybe they're a little hot, they want to get cooled off, but it's just something that you want to make sure that they are able to do so they don't give up, but maybe can continue on to their race and finish the race. Rule reminders: if an athlete fully travels outside of their lane during any competition without impeding another athlete, there will be a penalty enforced. Athletes must attempt to return to the proper lane and finish in their assigned lane. If they are fully outside of their lane at the finish, it will be considered a disqualification. If an athlete crosses a barrier and impedes another athlete, it is means for disqualification through the protest procedure. An athlete that was impeded has the option of starting the race at a later time for a proper score.
Kristen?
Yes, sir.
If an athlete finishes outside of their lane, basically what they get is an incomplete race, not a disqualification. They just didn't complete the race.
Gotcha. Thank you. Qualifiers. What's the point of the qualifier? We are really trying to make sure that athletes are ready for competition, because every athlete who comes out on your team, you know, it's great for them to train, but are they maybe ready to qualify and come into the championships? That is up to you as the coach to decide if all of your athletes are ready for a qualifier. So the idea is that you want to make sure that you're following the standards that that Special Olympics is in place, and what they're going to see at time trials and championships, so they're most prepared, not just what they're doing at practice. I do see a hand up, Mike. We want to address Frank at this time?
If you want to take a pause now, I was going to wait till you finish this one slide, but it's actually Frank and Bob.
Okay, well, we'll Frank first.
Frank. Yep. Okay. Frank, you're muted. You're self-muted. You need to unmute your own line. Okay, while that's going on, I'm going to go to Bob Baker, and then we'll come back to Frank. Bob, you're on. You're open.
Yeah, I wanted to ask the difference, the last comment about not completing the race and being disqualified. I mean, essentially it's the same thing, right? Because there's no medal that will be awarded then for either.
That's correctly, but if you tell them they're disqualified, it's kind of a stronger negative function than just they didn't complete the race because they weren't in lane.
Okay. All right. We're fairly new to kayaking. We just started last year, and this will be our first year competing. So I want to make sure we got all these rules down.
Thank you, Bob, for checking. And I really think the word disqualification, like Jack just said, a lot of those disqualifications come when athletes impede in another race, in another lane on another racer. So like he said, it kind of carries a heavier negative connotation, whereas not finishing a race, it's maybe of the upon the athlete's own volition if something happened why they didn't finish in their lane. Maybe they just stopped and turned around versus impeding in someone else's lane.
Well, technically speaking, I think that if they finish outside the lane, they did not finish the race, but you could still give them the participation ribbon.
Right, exactly, versus the disqualification. Exactly.
Right. Okay. So Frank, looks like Frank's been able to unmute his self-muted. So Frank, go ahead. That's okay.
No, I just, that was another point that I wanted clarification on, because last year we had an athlete in Anne Arundel County that started to race. Another athlete from another lane came into the lane, hit him, and spun him around. They actually didn't finish in their lane because they got knocked into another lane and they were disqualified. I guess the other athlete got back into their lane and finished, and they were able to receive a medal. But, you know, I just, when the original explanation was given, so I guess the bottom line is if you don't finish in your lane, no matter what happens during the race, you don't get to either re-race, you get disqualified no matter if someone else knocks you out of your lane. You have to finish in your lane.
I don't remember that discussion from last year. If somebody forces somebody out of lane, so they cannot complete the race in their lane, then they should not be disqualified.
Yeah, if that happened, Franco, I'm sorry that error was made, but yeah, they shouldn't have been disqualified for that.
Yeah, I mean, that was the explanation we were given. That's why I just wanted to make sure that I kind of understood it. So as we go through training again, we need to make sure that the athletes understand, even if they're hit by someone else, they need to make sure they get back into their lane and finish.
Yeah, you know, they definitely should strive to get back in their lane, but if they, particularly like if they're knocked out in the last 15 meters of the race or something like that, they may not have that opportunity to do so.
Okay. Yeah, this happened right at the start, but that's fine.
Okay. And then Greg Hollinsworth has, Greg, your line's open.
Hi, yeah, I'm just, I'm new to this since I'm with Howard County and I don't know anything about qualifiers. So how do we learn about when qualifiers are held, and can we set up our own?
Great question, Greg. I was just about to cover that in this slide. So you had a perfect segue from everyone's questions.
Great, thanks.
You're welcome. What a qualifier is definitely an opportunity for either your area, you want to host one yourself, or attend a qualifier. We're hosting one, a mandatory one, at time trials at Washington College. Any Saturday, Sunday, even a weeknight that you would like to host a qualifier, you would just submit a sanction form, and Bob is very, very familiar with submitting sanction forms and knowing what is required of hosting a qualifier. So he will be a perfect person, Greg, to help you out with a qualifier. But what you're trying to do is you're trying to see if your athletes are ready for competition, especially with such a new program as yours. You want to make sure that your course is set out correctly. And that was something I was going to talk about at the reminding everybody that we do have a coaches training coming up, that we are going to go over proper setup of a course for competition. You also must follow the rules for kayaking. I basically, if you are a host, that making sure that you have officials or judges there, an EMT on site, and that for ideally it to be considered a multi-area qualifier, that you have 3 areas or more participating in your qualifier. So season technically starts this first week of June and runs through our qualifier. The time trials is quote unquote the last qualifier of the season. But of course, with weather delays, sometimes there's nothing we can do. We have to kind of go past that date. But any time from this first week of June till mid-August, you can set up and host your qualifier. Mike or Jack, is there something you'd like to add into the explanation I've given for qualifiers?
What I would like to do, because there's always this question about what is a qualifier. Qualifier is basically a time trial. And you set definite markers at the 100 and the 200. Hopefully you can get a 500-meter course in. I know some of you don't have the space to do that, but the idea is it's a straight line. You don't need to do the buoyed course like I have. As Chris can tell you, that's a big job putting that out and taking it in, as well as building one. But make sure that your poles are definitely out there. You can use a GPS to set it. Your course. If you don't have a 500-meter, then you need to do the 200 and be very specific about your times. And we can take your 200-meter time, and using the formula for human endurance, we can actually come pretty close to figuring out what they will do for a 500.
So yes, ideally, we're going to go over more information about hosting a qualifier and setting up for a qualifier at the June 17th coaches training. So hopefully many of you have either signed up or you are available for that. There is a slide for it later on in this presentation. But it is something that, Greg, not just you as a new coach coming in with your Howard program, which I'm so excited about, but many other areas are asking and wanting to host qualifiers for kayaking. This is also something I've been trying to encourage, not just kayaking coaches, but other sports coaches to say, you know what, get a county line buddy. You know, contact someone, another county that you're next to, and try to host a qualifier together. So you're not the one who's the sole responsible for all the things that needed to do with the setup of a qualifier, because it can be overwhelming, especially during your first year. But the more you share the responsibilities and help each other out, you can kind of see how other people set up their qualifiers and can get times recorded for your athletes. And of course, it's fun, it's social, and everybody has a good time outside on the water. Okay, required time trial will be on August 11th at the Chestertown Washington College Boathouse, and this is an example. It wasn't last year's, this was the year before's course. I apologize if you're having a hard time hearing me. The rain's coming down pretty bad where I live, and I've got a glass enclosure. There's not really a quieter place for me to go, so I apologize for that. At this time, I've not heard of any qualifiers that have been announced, but as soon as qualifiers start, or sanction forms start rolling in, I will start notifying you and updating you as qualifiers are available, especially if areas are willing to have others come in. But sometimes if there are in-house events, that's because they're at their practices, they have limited space, or the time frame. They're having it on an afternoon or an evening at a park that just isn't conducive for people to travel and participate in. If areas are planning to host a qualifier, let me know. Maybe I can go ahead and hold off a weekend for you, or let people know that you're hosting on a specific weekend. And then, of course, if there's any assistance that you might need to host a qualifier, let us know. The biggest thing that you want to make sure that you have, of course, are timers. You have your lane line set up, you have the flags, and an air horn. But of course, there's quite a few more things in detail. But if you want to make sure that you want to make sure wherever you're practicing that they will allow you to put buoys in the water for a qualifier. So this is looking at the whole season. Once again, reviewing the training registration deadline, last day to submit forms, your competition registration deadline, and the August 11th time trials at Washington College. What we are doing this year that is a little different, so those of you who are new, this is all new to you, but those of you who've been coaching before, for the last 2 years, we've had to double up our time trials and championships because of weather. What we're going to attempt to do this year and what we've reserved is to have a rain date the following day. So as you can see there, the time trials in Washington College is on Saturday the 11th. But if we get rained out, we are going to try desperately not to double up and run both events on the championship day, that we will then have the rain date on Sunday, August 12th. So please, this is a change this year. So as you're talking to your coaches, your assistant, and your teams, make them aware that if we get rained out or the heat, we will run the following day, weather permitting. Same thing with kayaking on the championships. The 25th is our go day. If we get rained out or it's too hot, we will then have the rain date on Sunday, August 26th. Something that Jack, Ben, and myself from Washington College, we all decided that, you know, with all the time it takes to set up, to really just blow out one day and then have to wait 2 more weeks and run everything in one day, it's a lot. And I can only imagine those of you guys who travel quite a distance, that's early in the morning and an extremely long day for those of you participating.
And
go ahead, Jack.
for the time trials, the qualifier, people have to understand that even if it's hot, we could still run these. We have we've kind of used the 95 or degree temperature as the cutoff for not running them. But the time trial, the qualifier goes very, very quickly because of the way we run them. For instance, if people are running the 100, 200, we run them 200, but we catch their 100 meter time as they go past the 100 meter mark. So they only run one race. To do that for the 200, 500 meter distances, we do the same thing. We run people for 500 meters. We catch their time at 200. We catch their time at the 500. And we so far we have not run the 1,000, the 1K as a time trial. We take the we seed them basically based on their 500 meter time, which has worked out pretty good.
Thank you, Jack. The last date at the bottom.
If we go to rain dates, each delegation is going to have to accept the fact that they're really going to have to pitch in and help, because we tend to lose a lot of our volunteers on the rain date.
Yes, thank you for pointing that out, Jack. Yes, we have an online registration for volunteers, and they will only see the Saturday dates, the 11th or the 25th. So if all of a sudden we change it because of weather, day of, we might be able to contact volunteers, but they might not be available. So yes, of course, running through a rain date, it is definitely all hands on deck from a SOMD staffing point of view, but we are going to be shorthanded if we have to run in and use those dates. But having to run both events in one day was extremely, it was rather exhausting for the staff, and I even felt the athletes were pretty tired after that long day. The last date down at the bottom is the kayaking coaches training. I highlighted the time in red because I wanted to confirm this with Jack. I believe we had discussed a bit of an earlier time, at 10 o'clock to about 2:33 rather than 12, but I will confirm that on my paperwork. And we will be at the Washington College Boathouse, and of course that has a rain date as well, but once again we are dictated by the availability of the school. But I wanted to make sure you guys understood why we want people to come to the coaches training. This is a view from the docks of the Washington Boathouse construction that is occurring right now. And those of you who've attended this in the past, this is a completely new building where we normally had everybody, all of the delegations seated. So we are going to have to completely change where we've had viewers and spectators and families and everybody kind of hang out. It's going to be on the other side of the pavilion on the park side. So no matter how much further they are going with construction, as you can see, that's quite a bit of space that everybody is used to seeing. And what I really wanted to use the kayaking coaches training as is an opportunity as you, the coaches, to see this area and be prepared and best prepare your families and your athletes for the change. So our agenda for the coaches training will be course setup, not just what we do at the time trials and championships, but how you can best set up your own course for a qualifier. Best practices. We'll do a venue tour so you guys will understand and be prepared where you can park your trailers, where you can tell your families they can park. We'll provide maps. We'll, of course, do on-the-water training. And yes, I know it is Father's Day. We will have a Father's Day cookout. We'll still treat it as a training. Families are more than welcome to come for that cookout or eating time. And but we'll just need the good amount of some of the time available to be in the class for the coaches training. Once again, our coaches training is on Sunday, June 17th at Washington College.
For those of you looking at this slide, if you look at the bottom slide, you see a whole rack of, these are the sit-on-top kayaks made by Ocean Kayaks that we have at the college. There's 12 of them there. And so if you bring family members, you will be able to use those.
Great, Jack. That was a good point. Yeah, so you don't have to haul all of your kayaks down. Jack has graciously in Washington College offered to let us use theirs for the training. Excellent point. Would also PDFs be available, or they need to bring their own, Jack?
We'll have paddles and PDFs.
Thank you.
Flotation
PDFs, we'll send the slides out as a PDF. How's that?
Yeah.
PFDs, the slides will go up to PDF. Yes, thank you.
We've got a whole bunch of new paddles and more of the PFD, so we're in good shape.
Thank you, Jack. So once again, here's a few more resources if you'd like to take a look at more information about kayaking. Of course, I will be sending you the coaches training guide via email. If you do come to the coaches training, you'll get a hard copy of that because it's not that many pages. But if you're unable to make it, it's available at the SpecialOlympics.org link or even visiting our website, somd.org. If you have any questions, of course, you can contact your regional sports director. Myself, I'm at the top. I oversee specifically Calvert, Charles, Howard, Prince George, and St. Mary's. But of course, as the kayak sports lead, I'll be more than happy to answer any questions I can, or at least reach out to my sports management team to get sports-specific questions answered for you. Are there any other questions specific to kayaking that we can answer for you at this time? Please either raise your hand or type in a question there for us.
If people have issues where due to family vacations or illnesses, their paddlers are unable to make the qualifier on Saturday, I usually run a kind of a special one for those people that are unable to make it on Monday after the state qualifier. I keep once the course is up, I keep it there for 2 weeks.
Let's make sure that everybody understands what Jack is offering. That's if, it is the summer months, people are going on vacation, but that definitely needs to be emailed to myself and Jack, because once again, Jack is giving up his time to be available if that is something that might happen to one of your athletes or partners. But please make sure you email us, and that's why we have this webinar early enough in the season. That's why we ask you guys as coaches, when you sit down and meet with your teams, to go ahead and give them the entire schedule, why I'm giving you all these dates, so then they can share it with their families and discuss when they're going to be available. So if that happens, if they have something already at this point scheduled, that there might be an option for them to still participate at the championships. So thank you, Jack, for reminding me about that. But we want to make sure that people don't just expect or assume they're going to show up on Monday after the time trials to race. They still need to communicate with us about that need. So if there are any...
Kristen?
Yes?
Another issue we ran into last year was groups using, several people using the same kayak, and they were so close together that, we were sitting around waiting for people to show up or waiting for the kayak to come in and holding up the races. So people need to make sure they have adequate kayaks for their people so that this doesn't happen.
Yes, sir. We'll definitely make sure we mention that again pre-competition. I understand it might happen at practice because of numbers, but for competition, only 2 athletes per kayak. So you can't, no more than 2 athletes can share a single boat as they're going through the events. And in particular, I would even say they need to be athletes who are in different events, just so it makes it a little easier for our staging personnel. Okay, I'm going to turn the slides over to Mike Sarnowski. He has some reference slides and procedures he wants to go over. But of course, if there's anything that you guys want to bring up about kayaking, you can still ask, because this is your time, your information, to make sure we are all on the same page. So Mike, I could turn it over to you.
Sure, yeah, if you can just click through the next slide. Don't want to spend a whole lot of time, but do want to make sure that everybody is really clear on a few things. As Kristen mentioned earlier, for all athletes, in order, they can't be participating without a valid medical on file. And that medical needs to be valid through the date of the competition. This applies to all, actually all of our sports. So of course the date varies in terms of when, but we're not letting or having medicals expire mid-season and still have that person be valid. So as she indicated, we can send out to you a roster. The area leadership in your county or your area can provide that as well. Hopefully you have been already in contact with the leadership and know who is handling handles for your county, submitting medicals and submitting volunteer applications. Oftentimes it's the same person. Sometimes it's 2 different people. But if you haven't done that, please contact your contact person in your area to find out who that individual is. Because one of the things that you'll be doing is with the medicals, you'll be sending them the medical form so that they can get it uploaded and submitted to headquarters. As the same thing goes for the volunteer application and any certifications. If you can go through the next slide, this is the first page of the medical form. I'm not going to go through this in depth. Bottom line is they should be filling out everything in here. One of the most common things that is missed, however, is an indication of either a parent guardian or a emergency contact. Those are on the right-hand side. We do need to have that indicated. If there is no parent guardian listed for the athlete, you can't put self as the emergency contact. It's not going to help if that individual is injured at an event for us to contact them. We need someone else to contact there. Most of this is self-explanatory. This front page and this next page here can both be filled out sometimes by the athlete, him or herself, or by a family member or by the house counselor and such. You'll notice down at the bottom that actually you can go back to the previous page. There you go. There's a space at the bottom for a signature or a indication of who completed the form. We do absolutely need that information. So please be sure to include that as well. The next page is what needs to be filled out by a medical professional. Again, they need to fill the whole thing out. Some things that will get it rejected, I can tell you that right now, is if there is no signature at the bottom from the physician or the physician's assistant or any of the folks that are legitimately allowed in Maryland to fill out the form, or they also need to have the date of the exam must be on this page. It's a common thing that's missed, that we have to send things back, and the contact information for that physician's office. The other that is extremely important, and we're finding more and more it becomes a problem, is under where it says recommendations. There are 3 boxes to check. They must check one of them. If that's not checked, that's where it indicates that they, as a medical professional, is saying, yes, this athlete can participate in sports and Special Olympics, or they can't, or whatever the restrictions are. If the physician or whoever did the examination did not complete that, we can't accept the form, because they're not saying anything from a legal standpoint about the athlete or the individual having to do that they can actually be eligible to participate. The next page is one that is almost never needed, but it's provided. This is if there's a referral from the main physician. So if you can click through the next page.
Sorry, Mike, I'm getting there.
Okay.
Got it. Got it.
There we go. This is only needed if there's a referral. So if the doctor said, before I sign on this, I need to have a cardiologist examine the individual or something. That's when you need this type of thing. Otherwise, it is not necessary to submit this. But if it is, if under the recommendation they did say that there's a need for the an additional referral, then this form must be provided. And then the last page of the medical is a waiver. Again, must be signed either by the participant, if the participant is an adult and is a self-guardian, or by the parent or guardian if they are a minor or they are not their own guardian. The next slide, is volunteers. Again, it's saying the same type of thing. For the volunteers, every volunteer needs to have the volunteer application, which we'll look at in just a moment. They also need to have their protected behaviors, which is good for 3 years. And I'm sorry, I should have said that the medical is good for 3 years. The protected behavior for volunteers, the volunteer screening is good for 3 years, with one exception I'll note in a moment. They also need to have again, a protected behaviors. It's an online thing. A previous slide that Kristen showed shows you the link. It takes about 10 minutes. That's good for 3 years. And then same thing goes if they are a coach, they need to have the concussion training, also good for 3 years. The one exception in terms of the expiration for volunteer applications is if they are a minor. If they're a minor, it expires on the individual's 18th birthday. The day that they turn 18, they need to have a new form because they can then sign for themselves and they're an adult. But anything else is going to be require or it will be good for 3 years. It's simplified now for the typical volunteer form. If you can go to the next slide, is just 2 pages with a third page if they're a minor. Here they need to fill this out. I'm sorry, go back up. So definitely need all the information. There's a space for social security number. That is not necessary. On the next version of this form, we will probably completely get rid of that, but it's not necessary to provide that. Contact information we definitely need. We certainly need also the emergency contact. It'll get rejected if they're otherwise. That's that sort of middle box where it says emergency contact information. We also need the adult. If they're an adult, we need that one reference in that box there. And then the criminal background questions that everyone needs to fill out, those 5 questions there. Again, those are all things that will get it rejected. So you may as well check those before you even send it into the person who's from your area to send it into us. And then on the next page, they would need to have, again, you can see where the applicant's signature is. And if they're a minor, there's then a space for the parent guardian name and signature there. And then the next should be the student minor reference. This is absolutely required for anybody who's under 18 because we can't do an actual background check on those individuals. These require live signatures. And you as a coach, if you know the individual, can certainly serve. If you're not if that person's not a member of your family, you can certainly serve as one of the person's references. Another coach could serve as well as the other reference if you wanted to. Again, as long as they're not family members. I forget what else is in this section. There might be an incident report. Yeah, so you can read through this at your leisure. You should have copies of this on hand. This is a form that you would utilize most certainly if someone gets injured at your program. I can speak from personal experience. As many folks know, I coach as well for Special Olympics as a volunteer. Having this filled out and sent in absolutely makes, if the person needs to access the Special Olympics insurance, it smooths the way and has never been an issue, actually, when we submitted this. I have seen where this hasn't been submitted, and there are delays because the insurance company is going to want to get some additional information. This obviously make sure the person is taken care of before you worry about filling out the form, but certainly do fill out the form right after, get it signed and get it into the person that's there. But also, as is noted on the screen, get a copy to your area leader so that they have it, but getting it in. This is also a form that you can utilize if there is either a behavioral incident, if you need to document that, in case the code of conduct is going to kick in, or if there's damage to the property. So this can also serve as this. It's primarily used for persons getting injured, but you can also use that to document stuff. And again, Special Olympics has some insurance that can cover that as well. But that's there for you. And I'm not sure what else, if there is anything else after that. The sports certification, this is going through some transition. We certainly do recommend and strongly suggest that folks continue to get the sport-specific certification for coaches. There will be some changes to this. So while we're recommending it, we're not, and it is a requirement, we're not vigorously enforcing it at this time. But the information is here. If you go through the next, we've got the live training that's being provided. We also provide through a subsidy and a reimbursement coverage for online training through ASEP, which is the American Sports Education Program. There's some information there in terms of the different courses and all that are part of it. Unfortunately, I don't think that there's a kayaking course, a little too specialized for that. But I think anything else in this section? Sorry, it's been a while since we've done one of the preseason ones. Or is that the last slide?
No, there's one or two more, but Adam has his hand up, and so I just want to give him an opportunity.
Oh, okay. As does Frank.
Adam, you are open to speak if you had a question.
Cool. Yeah, I was just looking over the incident report. We were considering using like a public landing for practices, and I didn't know if there were any type of like forms that needed to be filled out or anything like that for like insurance purposes or anything if there were to be an incident at a public landing or something like that. I don't know if that question makes sense or not.
Yeah, I think so. So if it's as a public landing, you're not signing a contract or anything like that?
No.
Okay, I mean, contracts, just as an aside or as a reminder, because we do have this happen as well. No one in Special Olympics, not you, not even me, not anyone here other than Jim Schmutz, who is our president and CEO, no one can sign contracts, even for your local program. But if it's a public landing and they're allowing you to do that, there shouldn't be any forms that you need to fill out in advance. Certainly if the facility that you're using wishes to get a copy of our insurance and add it as an additional insured, Special Olympics can certainly do that. I will say that it takes a couple days sometimes, other than an emergency, but we can utilize that. But if there is some kind of injury or damage, this incident report should be able to take care of that.
Okay, thanks.
Great, and then it looks like Frank has his hand up too, unless that was from a previous. Frank and Jim.
He's self-muted, so Frank, you need to unmute yourself.
Okay, we'll go to Jim first, and then we'll come back. Hey, Jim.
All right, hey, can you hear me okay?
Yeah, we can.
Great. Hey, so I just listening to what you said, Mike, about contracts with facilities. We're using the Greenwell State Park, and we're working with the St. Mary's County, or actually the National Park Service, and they have some forms that they want us to fill out. I have not seen the forms yet. I don't think it's really a contract. I think it's just a kind of a usage form. Is that what you're referring to? That we would have?
If it's just that you're just reserving the space and you're not, let's put it this way: if you're signing the form and you are obligating Special Olympics to anything monetarily, like if you're saying that by agreeing to, I'm making this up right now, but by agreeing to utilize this space, Special Olympics agrees to pay St. Mary's College or the County of St. Mary's County in case of any damage, then you're getting into contract area.
Okay, yeah, this is purely just a usage thing. It's not, there's no discussion
more than
of
likely,
money.
Yeah, more than likely, as long as you're not obligating the organization to anything, then more than likely it is not a contract. If there's any question, you can go ahead and send it in to us and we'll double check that for you.
Okay, and I probably would like to have a copy of the insurance information just so I can send that along with whatever paperwork they have.
Okay, so you can have you can either contact Rhonda Garrison directly, Kristen is your area or your regional sports director, so she can assist you with that.
All right.
If they just want a copy of the insurance certificate, that's an easy.
Yeah, I think that's probably all it is.
Yeah, some facilities, particularly if you're holding an event there, may want you to have them listed as an additional insured. So if they get sued, our insurance would cover that. That may just take a day or two to get it. It's generally pretty quick, but there could be a backlog or something like that. So don't assume instantaneous service on that end.
Yes,
And
sir.
it looks like okay, great. Looks like Frank got his line open. Frank, you there?
Yeah. Yep, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yep, can hear you great.
Quick question about the coaches training. On I think it's on the 17th. Is there a limit on the registration? I mean, we've got a couple people that might want to attend, but they're not sure if they want to commit. I mean, if they do register for it, what kind of notice they need if they can't make it to make sure that they don't take up spots from someone else?
I'll leave that to Kristen and Jack. I don't think there's a limit.
As
But
far as I'm concerned, there's no limit. We may run out of boats, but I doubt it. And I'm going to be there until the last person leaves. So as far as time is concerned, that's not a problem either.
Okay.
Great question, Frank. I would ask to please be notified by that Friday, June, that's going to be the 15th, because we are going to be purchasing food for a cookout. And if all of a sudden I have 25 people registered and all of a sudden you have people say, oh, they just don't want to make it. I mean, once again, we know it's Father's Day. We are going to have something special for those who are able to participate. And we are welcoming families to come and, utilize the kayaks and maybe even give it an opportunity for us to maybe do some cool drills on the water, more than just coaches on the water. But I'd like to know so I can have a better planning, and then we're not being wasteful with food. So, Frank, the more people you want to get involved in your program who actually are going to be coaches and want to be coaches trained, the better. But please, if you wouldn't mind, by Friday, and this goes to all areas, please let me know if anybody's going to cancel. That would be really helpful. And of course, we will do the same if we end up having to cancel due to weather, to then implement our rain day for the coaches training, because we do want to make sure we make every opportunity to provide a face-to-face coaches training for all sports in every season. But we just want to make sure that we're catching the venue and in the time frame of when people are hopefully available, and then give you guys a chance to see where we'll be hosting the time trials and championships.
Sounds good.
great. So let's see what else is there on the next slide. Great. So this is again the sports certification we talked about, and again this just goes into it in more detail. I'm not going to go into it for here. Again, this is in the process of being changed. Actually, Jim Schmutz, our CEO, is on a special national team that is going through and revising the coaches' training requirements and curricula. The big thing is it's always good to learn more. It's everybody. Hard to believe even Jack can always become a better coach. So it's always a great thing. Even if you're an expert, being there with other coaches and learning is always a great opportunity. I frequently learn more in the sort of downtime and between time by talking to folks sometimes than I do within the course. And so there's always value with that. So I think that's it from this end, other than if there's any other questions. And while folks are either typing them in or raising their hand, I'll just say a big thank you to everybody for all the work you're going to be doing with your athletes leading into the season. Let's keep our fingers crossed for some great weather.
Yes, and thank you for all of you attending tonight's webinar. And I wholeheartedly agree with Mike that even though some of you coaches, you came last year to our coaches training, you're very familiar as a Special Olympics coach and the venue. It's just a great community to have and get ideas from fellow coaches and just have an opportunity to really kind of say, hey, how do you run your program? And Jack is such a great resource. He's been really helpful to me, sharing with ideas with me to then get out to you guys, that it really helps to just see each other face to face rather than just at a kind of a tense moment when you're on competition day with your athletes and everybody there involved. So once again, thank you for tonight. I really appreciate it. Please look forward to an email from me tomorrow with all the attachments and the webinar YouTube video in case you have people who you want to listen to this wonderful webinar. But looking forward to seeing all of you. If I don't see you at Summer Games next week, I'll look for you on the water in June. Have a great night, everybody.
Good night.